You are listening to GameBreak, brought to you by HNE.
This video is sponsored by... Science fiction fans have been waiting years for a suitable science fiction MMO. Many are excited that it is based on the Star Trek franchise. The story occurs within a 30-year span of time, taking place after the Star Trek Nemesis movie. Star Trek Online updates the franchise with new ships, species, and stories. The game features 6 factions: the Federation, Klingons, Cardassians, Romulans, and Uridyne, or also known as Species 8472, and the Borg. New players may choose a Federation officer, or Klingon, or etc. Once players reach a specific point in the game, they may unlock additional character creation options. The opening Federation story has Ambassador Spock, voiced by Leonard Nimoy, providing a backdrop of the political atmosphere. When the story begins, the player is a new bridge officer on a starship. The senior officers are killed, and he or she must take command. In the captain's seat for the first time, the player goes through the typical tutorial featuring a holographic doctor voiced by Zachary Quinto. By the end of the tutorial, the player will obtain a promotion and his own ship. As with most MMOs, there is a level system at play. Players start as an ensign and have to earn experience by completing missions. Each rank has multiple grades from lieutenant all the way up to fleet captain and to admiral. The early promotions come easy. There are 2 modes of play in this game. There are the typical land-based objectives, where the player is an avatar on some planet that has to kill the enemy, find an object, or perform acts of diplomacy. At space stations, players can upgrade their ships, crew, and themselves. The other mode of play is a starship simulation. Players fly around space, meeting objectives, and occasionally warring with other starships. This mode requires a little bit of intelligence, as players must handle every aspect of the ship's controls. Players must man the weapons, engines, shields, and propulsion. Everything is made slightly easier as the player joins others in groups or fleets. As an MMO, the graphics cannot have all the bells and whistles as non-MMOs, but they still do the franchise justice. There are plenty of options to allow players some customization and how they see the game. What really stands out is the detail in the ships, structures, and backgrounds. The game's developers have done a great job making this game feel like a part of the Star Trek lore. The game music is typical Star Trek, and there is an option to allow players to use their own media players instead of source music. The sound effects are spot on. During heated starship battles, one could swear that they were listening to, if not watching, an episode of Star Trek on television. Those with surround sound will benefit the most, as sometimes not everything will be in sight and sound will be the only way to find something. The universe is vast. Players can explore the Federation, Cardassian, Romulan, Klingon, and Borg space in the least. There are seemingly countless locations to visit in both the starships and on foot. The game's developers promise to keep the content fresh by periodically expanding space to travel options and missions. The controls are easily utilized between the keyboard and the mouse. The mouse controls most activity on screen via point and click. The keyboard controls movement and can be used for menu shortcuts. If players do not like how the screen is arranged, they can always customize the HUD or reassign keys. The only complaint that I have is that turning controls via the keyboard are not sensitive enough. If a player turns right, they turn an entire 45 degrees. Sometimes players would just rather turn a little bit. Luckily, players can use the mouse by holding down both buttons to maneuver. This game is easily the best iteration of Star Trek thus far. The only game to have come close, in my opinion, was Star Trek Armada 2, but that can only compare to the Starship portion of the game. For land-based ROMs, I beckon back to Star Trek Deep Space Nine for the Sega Genesis. Star Trek Online is free to play. There are options to buy lifetime memberships, which provide monthly currency as well as occasional unlocks. If you're a fan of Star Trek and MMOs, Star Trek Online is probably the best option on the internet.
To read more in relation to what was covered in this segment, previews, reviews and other game-related articles, log on to www.haslage.net.